Tonight we're talking about the conflict that is really tearing apart the world of women's sports. Should trans athletes be allowed to compete? Now, first off, I want to say one thing. I think trans athletes should absolutely be allowed to compete. Listen, I grew up as an athlete, but for being in team sports and being able to compete, I'd have been in a lot of trouble. I'd have been lost. I don't think trans athletes should be denied the wonderful world of athletics and competition. The question is, where should they compete and who should they compete against? Now, Blossom is saying, look, there may be differences between biological men and biological women, but we're talking about transgender athletes, not male athletes competing against female athletes. Blossom, you'd give me that male athletes versus biological male athletes versus biological female athletes, of course, that's not fair, but you're saying that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about transgenders that have gone through a lot of hormonal suppression therapy, testosterone blockers, for years sometimes, a minimum of 2, according to the NCAA now, and some for much longer than that, right? And you're saying, okay, let's talk about those comparisons. And I do want to talk about those because Dr. Carol Hooven from Harvard University, she is very much supportive of the transgender population across the board. She did a meta-analysis of like 50 different studies looking at hormone suppression therapy and testosterone blockers, and the conclusion of looking at over 50 studies was that after testosterone blockers, there's only about a 5 to 10% drop in muscle mass, and that there's no evidence whatsoever that these advantages reduce to the extent that it would match a female-bodied person. And the reason is that trans women who block testosterone do not remove initial male advantages. It doesn't change wingspan. It doesn't change post-pubescent male's anatomy. And there are only slight changes. At the most, you start with a difference of about 45% across the board in lean body mass, 40% in upper muscle mass, 33% in lower body muscle mass, 83% in tendon resistance, 30% in cardiac output, and the most you're going to get is a 10% reduction, and that doesn't even almost get to a level playing field. So even with hormone therapy and testosterone blockers, particularly post-pubescent, it doesn't level the playing field at all. So what you're saying is not supported by the science. The advantages of height, wingspan, bone strength, larger heart, and greater lung volume, the only thing that seems to equate is hemoglobin. Other than that, it just simply doesn't equate.
I disagree, Dr. Phil, because again, I'm questioning for the trans people that they study, when there's only less than 10 trans athletes in the NCAA. Like, that is what I really want to know. It sounds like there's a lot of bias in this research, and I would actually like to study up on it myself and really figure out what's going on here. I think it's very dangerous to try to weaponize these statistics against trans women who are trying to play in sports, mainly because of safety concerns. And I think we got to be really clear. There is a lot more research that still needs to be done. And we also just have to be very, very careful when we talk about research like that. I think we're still light years away from really finding out the truth.
Well, I think she was very careful about this, and I think you should study her research so you could talk. I think if you look at it,
study it.
I think you should look at it, and then you can talk about it and see if you find flaws in it. We have to take a quick break. Another trans woman who is going against her own community, we're going to find out why next. If you're a business owner, listen up now. You won't want to miss this. Is your growth stalling while competitors race ahead? Thousands of businesses have scaled with FYSI strategic growth planning. FYSI can build custom roadmaps that unlock new markets, expand operations, and boost profitability. This is what separates billion-dollar companies from small businesses. And FYSI can help you close that gap. Act now because spots for the free $5,000 risk assessment are limited. Use promo code Dr. Phil. That's code DRPHIL and visit fysi.com/Dr. Phil or call 800-877-4000 today. That's code Dr. Phil. Visit fysi.com/Dr. Phil or call 800-877-4000 today for your free $5,000 risk assessment. Sarah is a transgender activist that's challenging the very community that she's part of. She believes biological advantages create an uneven playing field in women's sports and says she's proof of that. Sarah is now 37 and self-described post-trans activist and athlete. Sarah, you've been listening to everything. What did you want to add?
Yeah, so obviously I think that there's no amount of hormones that you can take that will ever erase the biological advantage that you have, especially by going through male puberty. But even we know before male puberty, males still have an advantage when it comes to lung capacity and hip angles and all that stuff that goes with being biologically male. I think, it's interesting, Blossom would bring up Leah Thomas. Leah Thomas is a prime example of why you can never erase this advantage. See, Leah Thomas, so in elite swimming, there is a 11% difference between male and female athletes in the elite areas. Leah Thomas, between swimming from male and then swimming in the female category, only lost 2.3% of their time, of their performance. So they didn't even come anywhere near meeting that. And that's how Leah Thomas went from 500 in the men's category to #1 in the female category.
Well, one thing that Dr. Hooven pointed out is that if you take all of the hormone suppression therapy and testosterone blockers, the best that you can hope for is you're going to have, maybe 3 or 4%. After 3 years of testosterone blocks, muscle mass drops an average of 3 to 5%. And hemoglobin does stabilize, but that when you've got a 40% difference in muscle mass, 3 to 5% doesn't make much difference. So you're still going to have a huge advantage, and you think that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that I'm kind of proof of this too. I grew up an athlete. I've been an athlete. I was wrestling since the time I was 4 years old, all the way through high school. I was an all-state wrestler. I joined the Army right after that. I started transitioning in 2019. And in 2020, I started going to the gym. And then after a year of being on hormones and everything like that, I'd never touched a spin bike in my life. And within 6 months, I was pushing power numbers, like max power numbers that would have been within the 80th percentile among females.
Hold that thought for a second, because we've got to take a break. Sarah says being transgender is a result of a mental illness. And Blossom, of course, completely disagrees with that. We'll talk about that after the break. Life is full of surprises, and emergencies often strike when we least expect them. But preparation is key, and that's where Jace Case comes in. With Jace Case, you'll have essential emergency prescription medications right at your fingertips, ready when you need them most. Whether it's an unexpected illness or a travel mishap, having the right meds on hand can turn a potential crisis into just a minor inconvenience. Don't let the unexpected catch you off guard. Jace Case gives you peace of mind so you can tackle life surprises with confidence. Be ready. Take charge today. Head over to jace.com. That's JASE.com. And when you check out, use the code PHIL, spelled PHIL, to get a discount on your order and to have the right meds on hand the moment you need them. Sarah, you believe that you do suffer from gender dysphoria.
Yes, I do.
And you believe that that's something that women that are transgender have to acknowledge?
Yeah, I think you have to acknowledge that there's a difference between trans women and women. You can't change your sex biologically. Trans women are males, which makes them a subsection of men. And because the definition, like postmodernists want to erase the definition of what it is to be a man. If you can't, define what a man or woman is without using the term or saying that it's just simple feeling, something that you can't measure, then that doesn't make sense. And so an adult human female is a woman, an adult human male is a man. I just think the term trans woman to identify like who I am and who Blossom would be is more apt, because that would show that it's more indicative to show how we live our lives and present ourselves to society, but you cannot change your sex.
I 100% disagree with Sarah. Listen, being trans is not a mental illness, okay? Now, I'm somebody who has experienced gender dysphoria, but not all trans people experience gender dysphoria. There are some trans people that just transition socially, mentally, emotionally, and they may not like a physical transition, and that's okay too. They are not less trans just because they choose that route. Trans women are women. It's point blank and the simple. And I think that weaponizing it into conservative propaganda is a detriment to the trans community. And again, I talk so much about safety because we have to live with this. It creates a domino effect when we spew rhetoric that can become so hateful and that people propagandize against us. And so I just really want us to be really careful with the language. When we talk about mental illness, okay, there are people out there that truly suffer with mental illness. Mental illness has more to do with poor health. Gender, it has to do with poor health, excuse me. And dysphoria has more to do with an abnormality. And with trans people, their gender identity can feel like an abnormality because they are feeling like their outside body should be aligned with how they feel on the inside. And for a lot of us, being able to take hormones and being able to transition is the way for us. And again, when we talk about bone density levels, there is no actual way that you can measure somebody's bone density level and just call it research. I'm sorry, the size of somebody's lungs, heart, and other organs in their body cannot determine somebody's agility and their vitality. And so I stand 10 toes down on that. And I just think that we got to be really careful when we talk about mental illness and trans people. Trans people are not an ideology. We are real. We are here, and we're not going anywhere, even under a Trump administration.
And Linnea, you feel strongly about this because you've been in the situation of having to compete in what you believe are unfair circumstances. So it's not a political issue for you, it's a real life issue for you, Linnea, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I completely value Blossom's opinion on the matters. I hope she values mine as well. There are a multitude of different things that need to be studied and looked into as we continue discussing this banner. But as it is right now, I agree. I don't think there's enough research. I don't think that we should be making such decisions about different categories of things of that nature. It becomes very unfair. However, conversations like this are exactly what we need to be continuing doing, seeing different points of view from different individuals with different ideas of what is fair and what's not fair. And from there, we can make decisions that are not exclusive to anybody. I truly want to find inclusivity for all, especially when it comes to sports and being able to do what people want to do and find fairness in that for everyone.
My final thoughts next. Let's cut to the chase. Your savings could be in serious trouble. When Elon Musk is out here warning us to brace for temporary hardship, you might want to listen. I trust Preserve Gold to safeguard my accounts, and I urge you to do the same. They're the only precious metals company I recommend. Are you going to sit back and hope for the best or take control of your financial future? Text Dr. Phil to 50505 to get your free precious metals guide from Preserve Gold. With gold prices recently breaking records and analysts predicting this trend to continue through 2025, you cannot afford to wait. As a bonus, you can get up to $15,000 with a qualified purchase from Preserve Gold. So don't wait. Text Dr. Phil to 50505. That's DRPHIL to 50505 today. Sarah, you believe that sports have played a really important role in your life, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you
absolutely.
said you've wrestled since 4.
Yeah, yeah, I've been competing my whole life.
When you've been in sports all your life, can you imagine not having that experience, not having that camaraderie that comes from team sports sometimes, not having the thrill of competition, all of that? And I think it would be terrible if if that's taken away from any segment of the population, transgender or otherwise. Transgender individuals, there's no way they should not have the camaraderie that comes from competition, not have the experience, the discipline and achievement that comes from being able to compete in sports and athletics. You know, Blossom, I think that would be terrible. We need to find a way that it works for everybody. The friends that you make, the experiences that you have, the lessons you learn, that shouldn't be taken away from any segment of the population, including the transgender population. No way do I want that to be taken away from you or anyone. That just should not happen. We got to find a way to make that work. And so understand, I get that. I don't want that to be taken away. Living transgender in a world where you are a distinct minority is tough enough without taking that away. That's how I feel about it anyway.
Yeah, nobody's trying to tell trans athletes that they can't compete. You know, they want it to be fair. There should be an open category for trans athletes to be able to compete in. Unfortunately, what we've even seen with like the Boston Marathon and stuff like that is the trans athletes end up still competing with women because the open category ends up becoming all the mediocre men.
Again, trans women should definitely play in sports against women. You know, the number of trans people that are in sports, it's so small. So there can't be anything created specifically just for trans people. Trans people will have to go along with the crowd. And in this case, trans women would have to go along with cis women. I think it's kind of weird how trans men do not experience the same type of trauma that trans women athletes do. And I find it very interesting how trans men athletes can almost get a pass in sports versus trans women athletes. And I think that's something that we have to kind of wake up within ourselves as well too. I think because of the political climate that we live in, trans women are faced with so much hatred for no reason. We're only 1% of the population. But because you have someone like Donald Trump in power who is using trans people to scapegoat his own issues, it's falling back on us. And it's becoming dangerous as just a trans person living in this world. And I think what needs to happen is we have to continue to allow trans women to play in sports. We have to continue to look at all of the science and the statistics. Because again, there's only less than 10 trans athletes in the NCAA. So having to make an executive order just based on that is wild to me. Leah Thomas, again, was beaten by cis women, which means that there are cis women that have a competitive edge than Leah Thomas, and it debunks that trans women have a competitive edge over cis women. And I'll leave it at that.
All right. Blossom, thank you for your time and thank you for sharing. Well, it's certainly a very complex issue, and I absolutely do not support transgender athletes in women's sports. I never have. I've said it very clearly. I've said it loud. I've said it long. I continue to say it now that there is good science. It is solid science, and it just says you cannot do enough hormonal therapy or testosterone blockers to level the playing field, even if you start prepubescently, but you certainly can't if you do it postpubescent. So there's just no way.